Good evening, everyone. As Brad mentioned, my name is Chris Naff, and I'm a commercial real estate broker at Kelleher and Sadowski here in Worcester. I am thrilled to be introducing our speaker tonight, Mr. James Keys, because this really is a full circle moment for me. 15 years ago, I was sitting in Mechanics Hall for my graduation from Millbury High School. A fellow Millbury High graduate, Mr. Keys was our commencement speaker that night, and I had a front row view to watch him share his story. Though he has led a life of one impressive accomplishment after another, he had the humblest of beginnings. His first childhood home had 3 rooms in total and no running water. With the encouragement of some family members, he determined at a young age that he would set out to grow and achieve as much as life would allow. And he certainly did just that. As much as a full circle moment tonight is for me, it is also a welcome home reception for Jim, for upon graduating from Millbury High, he then attended Holy Cross, graduating in 1977 with a degree in political science. Shortly thereafter, he graduated from Columbia University with his master's in business administration. From there, his career took off like a rocket. As a 21-year veteran at 7-Eleven, he served as CFO, COO, and ultimately CEO from 2000 to 2005. During Jim's leadership, he drove the convenience giant to 36 consecutive quarters of same-store sale growth and record profits, until he successfully negotiated the sale of the company to 7-Eleven Japan. After a short 2-year retirement, Mr. Keys was recruited to run Blockbuster Inc. as chairman and CEO from 2007 to 2011, where he led the company to worldwide revenues of over $5 billion across 7,000 stores, before a restructuring of the company and eventual sale to Dish Networks. And when I mentioned earlier that tonight was part of a welcome reception for him, that's only partially true. Because since 2017, he has sat on the Holy Cross Board of Trustees, providing guidance and service to the institution that gave him his foundation for his future. He also serves on the Board of Overseers at Columbia University and previously served on the American Red Cross Board of Governors. Our resumes are practically identical. One fateful day, when guest lecturing at Columbia, he saw a student wearing a shirt with 3 words that stopped him in his tracks. The shirt read, "Education is freedom," which I'm sure Jim will attest have been true words throughout his entire life. That chance encounter inspired him to launch the Education is Freedom Foundation, which has helped over 100,000 students transform their lives through education. He recently launched his book with the same title, and having purchased a copy before tonight's event, I highly recommend you read it. And if we were mistaken that all these accomplishments left little room for other pursuits, Jim is passionate about aviation and space technology. He's been his own pilot for over 40 years and often pilots his own jet during his travels. His passion for flying has even made him friends with the likes of Buzz Aldrin. I was hoping if tonight went well enough, Jim might let me borrow the jet for a weekend or two. A career full of achievement. He has won the Ellis Island Award and was admitted into the Dallas Business Hall of Fame. Most notable of all, perhaps, in 2005, he received the Horatio Alger Award. This award is bestowed upon exceptional leaders who have triumphed over adversity to achieve greatness. Recipients personify the American dream, and their experiences are proof that with perseverance, unwavering belief that anything is possible in our country through the free enterprise system. On that fateful night in Mechanics Hall, I was in awe of Mr. Keyes' story. The leader of 2 Fortune 500 companies, a philanthropist, a startup investor, and even his own pilot. I'll call them the 5 keys to life. The first of which, embrace change. The second, have confidence. Third, keep things simple. Number 4, be persistent. And finally, develop an insatiable appetite for knowledge. Those 5 principles have brought him far, and I have remained inspired by him since my graduation in 2009. His story is truly one of an American dream, and here to tell that story is none other than James W. Keyes.
Chris, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here in my home. I mean, this literally is a homecoming for me, so very, very special opportunity for me, and I'm grateful for it. Brad, Chris, my friends from Holy Cross who are here, thank you so, so much for this opportunity. Chris just gave my talk, so thank you very much. No, I have been blessed. I truly lead a life that I get up every day and I can't wait to find out what the next adventure is going to be, because it's something new. And Chris gave you a little bit of a flavor for the kinds of things that I get involved with. But to give you a little snapshot, I'm working with a rocket company in California, a bunch of former SpaceX kids, actually, who spun out of SpaceX to build the Starship, not for Mars or lunar orbit, but for efficient transportation of satellites and bodies to the next space station that they're building with some other friends of mine called Axiom out of Texas. I've been very fortunate to do things like that. I just give you an example. I flew down to, had a call from Charlie Duke, Apollo 16. Charlie was kind enough to write an endorsement, as with Buzz Aldrin, for Apollo 11 for my book. And Charlie said, "Hey, how'd you like to share a copy of your book on video, and we'll do it in 0 gravity?" I was like, "Yes." Now I think he's going to invite me up to space, but it was affectionately called it's a parabola ship. I won't tell you what they call it affectionately, but not only did I get to do that, but since I fly, I picked up Charlie in Greenville, South Carolina, where he lives, and flew. Since I had General Duke on board, I called up NASA and said, "Hey, General Duke coming in, can we land on the shuttle strip?" Because that's where we were going to take off from to do the 0G flight. And they said, "Sure, General Duke, of course." So I got approval to land on the shuttle strip, land my plane with Charlie as my co-pilot, and then they bring out the water cannons, and the water cannons are shooting. You know, it was just a beautiful moment. And then, by coincidence, it happened to be the same day that Intuitive Machines, a company also out of Texas, had that lunar probe land on the moon. The first time we've been back to the moon for 50 years. And here I am with Charlie Duke, Apollo 16, at NASA watching this event. And he's saying, "Oh yeah, that was me," or "That was me taking that picture of John Young jumping around on the moon when they did that." Just amazing things. But so that's just one. I have other amazing things I get to do. I'm working with the Vatican. I've been working with the Vatican for 10 years on a project to take Vatican art in using technology. You've seen these immersion experiences with Van Gogh and Monet. I'm doing it with the Sistine Chapel. The Vatican's paired me up with the Archdiocese of Sydney, of all things, because they're a little bit innovative. And we are together working on an immersion experience where we'll take panels from the Sistine Chapel and be able to bring them to people all over the world, so you don't have to go to Rome to see the beauty. And imagine with technology, the ability to have Michelangelo sitting there in holographic form, and with AI technology to be able to give someone a microphone and ask him questions. What did you intend with the Noah panel? What was the Pope encouraging you to capture in that? I mean, just impossible things. Those are a couple. I write some music. Anybody like Leonard Cohen?
Yeah.
You know the song Hallelujah? I wake up in Rome one night and I couldn't sleep, and I had that song rolling around in my head, and I said, wait, I've got an idea. And I jumped out of bed and I did an arrangement. I don't know if you remember the lyrics. The lyrics are a little dark. I tied her in a chair, I cut her hair, you know. And then the Hallelujah part's beautiful, right? It's very, very moving. So I replaced kept the chorus, kept the Hallelujah part, and I replaced the lyrics with the words to the Lord's Prayer. I found an adaptation that works, and it's a beautiful thing. I promise you, it would make you cry. And anyway, then I've been having trouble getting the rights to that because Sony owns the rights to this, so it's not as easy as I thought. But I tell you that story to sort of make the point that I lived this amazing life, not because I'm any smarter, I promise you, than anybody else. And to prove that, my brother is here tonight, and he will tell you that he is a lot smarter than me. True story. And so what happened? I have a secret, and it's a gift that I'm going to share with you. I captured it in this book that now I've written, and so I had to add that to my list of things. So I can check that box. I've written a book, but I believe this book is the cumulative effect of a life of learning, and I've discovered that I can do anything. If I want to work on rockets, I can go work in aerospace. If I want to go paint, I study at the Florence Academy of Art. If I want to work with the Vatican, I figure it out and use technology to bring art to life. If I want to write music, I'm a terrible musician, by the way, but I find it's easier to write music because then no one knows if you make a mistake when you're playing. But I've learned that basically, I've learned how to learn. And it's something that I've tried to share with others, because lifelong learning really just makes everything that you do richer. And I wish for everyone the opportunity to wake up and just can't wait for that next adventure. And it's possible for anyone, because it just comes down to learning something new every single day. So how did this all start? Let me take you back. I want to share a little bit of my journey, because it was not a usual journey. So here's where I grew up. Chris made a quick reference to a 3-room shack. This was in Grafton, about maybe 10 miles from here at best. It was literally a 3-room shack. Now, it didn't look quite that bad. The picture on the right's my dad. That was when we were actually living there. The picture on the left is after the house was condemned. We had quite some challenges. Now, during that time, I had no idea. I thought we were rich. Why? Because my dad had junk cars. And there were junk cars in the yard. Why did we have junk cars in our yard? Well, he would take them. He worked at Bay State Abrasives, if some of you from the area remember that, tough factory. He, hardworking guy, but he would take these junk cars and sell the scrap metal on weekends, fill up a truck and take them down to the scrap metal place and sell it just to make a little extra money for us. And I thought that this was the best thing ever. The kids from the wealthy side of town with all the fancy game rooms, they'd come down to my house to play in the junk cars. So I thought I was the one that was, rich. And what I had, and I didn't realize it at the time, I had freedom. They had rules. I had to be in by a certain time at night. Well, I didn't have any rules, because I kind of had some adversity going along. It wasn't just that we didn't have running water in this house. It was a bit of a challenging environment. Our mom decided when I was 5 that she had had enough, and she found someone else and decided that she was going to go uptown. If you remember, there was a trailer park next to the fair. So my mom went uptown to the trailer park because they had running water. It was pretty fancy. So that was pretty tough, but again, I'm a little kid, no big deal. I get to spend time with Dad. And what I didn't realize is that how precious that time would be. And there's really an important lesson here, because you look at it from the outside and you say, oh my gosh, this poor kid, he grew up poor. No, not really, but from the outside looking in, one might think that. Well, he had all these devastating things happen. His mom leaves at 5. I come home from school one day about 10 years old, and there's a red sign on the door. And I didn't know what the word condemned meant. I had to go look it up. And I said, oh my, okay, now I see what that, they are going to take our house. But my dad used to tell me, and my mom, we don't know what to say, son. We don't want you to have the hard life that we have in this factory. And we don't know what to tell you, because both of them, I think, dropped out of school, 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. And they said, we don't really know what to tell you, but it sounded very fatalistic the way my dad would say it. They can take your money. They can take your car. They can take your house. They did. But they can't take what you know. And all of that knowledge, it's free. Those books that your mom brought home from the grocery store free with a bag of groceries, remember those? A couple heads nodding. Those were full of knowledge. And that was my resource. That was my escape. And so somehow, some way, I equated knowledge with freedom. I already had a taste of freedom. I realized that the more I could be independent, and while it was a horrible thing to say, well, you lost your mom, she left you, and you didn't have anyone to take care of you, it gave me a huge sense of independence. I had no safety net, and so it made me fiercely independent and caused me to turn to learning, to education. So I did it, so it worked. Now, how many in here are teachers? Anybody here a teacher? Few. My teachers saved me, because I found that in Grafton Elementary School, Millbury Memorial High School, I had teachers who would give me that encouragement that I needed and encourage me to learn to learn. And even when I finally made it here to Holy Cross, I had teachers who would intervene and help redirect me. Some of my friends from Holy Cross remember the story of a professor here, Father Lapamata. He was a history teacher, and he intervened because I was going to go to law school. And he said, Keith, you're going to make a terrible lawyer. He was right. I would have made a terrible lawyer, a little too ADD or something to law. And he said, no, you must go at least get a JD MBA. I didn't even know how to spell MBA. I can assure you. Business to me was the factory my dad was. I wanted no part of that place. And I didn't have any perspective of what business was or could be. And so I said, yes, Father, I'll consider it. And I applied to Columbia because they were one of the only schools that had a JD MBA. Never in my wildest dreams would I have envisioned myself being able to even get into Columbia University, much less pay for it. But somehow, some way, I did. But here I am at Holy Cross, and I got to tell you, I told you why this is such a special experience for me. You realize the last time I was on this stage, I wasn't dressed like this. I was dressed like this. Okay, enough of that. You just I had to do it. We were talking beforehand. I was in a play called Barefoot in Athens or something like that. I don't know how in the world I got roped into that. But yeah, I was right here on this stage in a toga. Oh. Yep. But every one of those experiences contributed to the person that I am today, because standing up here on stage in a toga makes you fearless, which I ultimately had to be, and it proved to be very beneficial. So let me just take you a little bit through this path. So how did all this happen? How did he get from this little shack in Grafton to pay for Holy Cross? Cool produce, if anyone's from Worcester, driving a truck. I had a brother who was a truck driver. He taught me to drive. I went in and said, I'm a truck driver. They said, you're 16 years old. They let me somehow drive a produce truck, and it worked. McDonald's, Grafton Street, shift manager. I was running around the parking lot trying to clean it up because I needed to work so bad. And they said, well, son, we'll make you a shift manager. We'll send you to Hamburger U. They tried to talk me into Hamburger U instead of Holy Cross. I'm like, I think I made the right decision there. But I ultimately got there, and I got through Columbia, and I end up with an opportunity to go to an oil company. And Chris described this meteoric career where I just took off and everything was great. Not so much. Here's what happened. Get 7-Eleven. Well, first of all, I got to Gulf Oil first, go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My career is taking off like a rocket, not because I'm a genius, but because the timing was good. I had discovered something called a personal computer. And it was a tool, and so I'm using it, and everyone else was still doing spreadsheets. And they thought I was a genius. So I'm getting promoted, and I'm working for the chief financial officer, and doing great things, and my career is taking off, and all of a sudden, guess what happens? Gulf goes through a merger. Boone Pickens went in, made a run on the company. They tried to acquire city service. They failed. They merged with Chevron. Now all of a sudden, this meteoric rise in my career, the Chevron guys said, son, you're gonna have to pay your dues. And so change occurred. Setback in my career. Okay, I kept my head up, looked out positively. New opportunity. 7-Eleven had bought an oil company. And so one of my peers from Gulf Oil went there to be CEO, brought me in to be head of strategic planning. I'm like 23 years old or something. It was a small miracle they trusted me. But I was able to go, and again, my career's taking off. Then what happens? 7-Eleven went through an LBO, leveraged buyout, took on $4 billion of debt at 17% interest. This is in the year 1987. And that was just a matter of time. By 1991, 7-Eleven's bankrupt. Again, I'm sitting there going, oh man, here's I thought my career was great. Change. During that time, I witnessed almost everybody I was working with put their head down, be discouraged, woe is me, victim mentality, wasn't our fault, competition, blah, blah, blah. Everybody blaming everybody. And I decided there's a silver lining in this cloud somewhere. I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work smarter during this period. And we came out of bankruptcy. I even got fired during that time, by the way. I was working on a special project for the CFO, and the guy I was reporting to was all paranoid about it and tried to fire me. But he didn't actually escort me out of the building, so I stayed. I kept coming back to work. True story. Took my admin, took my title. I was no longer a VP. He wanted me to quit. But I kept my head up because I knew that there was a restructuring, and I was doing important work for the CFO that he didn't know, that no one knew at the time. Make a long story short, we came out of that bankruptcy. I got promoted. The guy that tried to fire me, he got fired. And the company was able to reinvent itself. We came out of that. I became the head of strategic planning for 7-Eleven. I was able to build a plan for the company to go forward, and then eventually became chief financial officer. So I love to tell the story. I was able to build 7-Eleven's strategic plan for the new company. Then I was able to finance it as chief financial officer. And by the way, I had no accounting class here, not one accounting class here at Holy Cross. I took one core accounting at Columbia. And when they made me CFO, I went home and told my wife, where's that accounting book? Please, I need it now. I can't remember if debits are on the left or the right. I'm in deep trouble. Please help me. But I made it. Somehow I made it through. I had a great controller and a great audit partner. They saved my life. So again, I kept running into these changes, but every time I'd come into a period of change, I'd find an opportunity. So I finally reflected on that, and I realized eventually I got to be named CEO. And I had to go buy that picture really quick. Change. And if we can figure out how to overcome our natural resistance to change, great things can happen. So I stepped back from these things and started to think about what is it that I can share with others. And as I was teaching my own team internally, whether it was 7-Eleven, whether it was Blockbuster, I talked a lot about how to learn, what to learn, how to learn, and why. And primarily this what to learn, I spent a lot of time both at 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. And what I discovered was that these three things can work. They can work in virtually any environment. When I speak to kids, I have the privilege of speaking to a group of Holy Cross students. There's some here tonight, right? Yes. I got to speak with some of your peers just last week, and it was a great experience because I'm able to share why these things are so important. And it's those things I wish I could have told myself when I was a junior or senior here at Holy Cross. So I started with this idea that I can share these elements of what to learn. The idea about change that we all know is a problem for each of us individually. It's a problem in our personal lives. It's a problem in our companies. It's a problem in our society. Society doesn't like change, right? So what is the biggest obstacle? It's that little person on your shoulder that says, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. We all have it, the imposter syndrome, it's there. So I tried to, in the course of researching the book, figure this out. What causes that resistance to change? And I came up with this, that there's a section of our brain called the amygdala. And it's a portion of our brain that causes us, triggers that fight or flight reaction. We developed as cavemen, we had to have that to keep ourselves from being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, right? And that portion of our brain is far less relevant and critical to us today. There are very few times, we have no natural predators today, unless you're a surfer maybe. And we don't really need that reaction, and yet you see it in the boardroom. Fight or flight, resist, don't say anything, withdraw. It's there, it's all around us, the fight or flight syndrome. So I've got an analogy for you. You heard on the pilot, I brought this. This is called an emergency checklist right out of my airplane. Now, here's why this is important, because when you fly home, or next time you get on a plane, think about your pilot and something happens. I train once a year. They put me in a simulator and they try to kill me for 3 days. They give me engine fires, they give me wind shear, they give me all these catastrophic things. And what I do immediately, I'm trained when something awful happens in my airplane. I reach over, I pull out my emergency checklist, I turn to whichever section it is. Let's see, emergency restart, dual engine failure. Ooh, that's not good. That would be bad, but that's in C3. Now, it's hard to imagine your pilot doing this, but very quickly I turn to C3 and it shows me the envelope that I need to descend to make my engine start properly. There's no way I could remember all that stuff, but more importantly, what if your pilot, instead of doing that, turned to the fight or flight syndrome, the amygdala kicked in. And no, you could over control the airplane and the wings come off. Or alternatively, frozen in fear. The airplane is going to spin out of control. So aviators are taught to overcome their fear, their lack of confidence, through training, through knowledge. Because I could never remember what I would have to do in a dual engine flameout, but I can turn very quickly to the facts, look for the data, find the answer, and respond accordingly. That's the difference that all of us can use. We can all invoke our aviator brain instead of our caveman brain in the boardroom, in the classroom, with your family around the dinner table. Instead of reacting, we can turn to information. A friend of mine, I've been really blessed throughout this course of writing this book. John Maxwell, the writer, has written 20 books or something like that. Harvey Mackay, 15 bestsellers. Harvey, I told him I was writing this chapter on confidence, and I wasn't sure how to communicate this to people, and he said, use my 3 words. He says, I teach this all the time. So Harvey Mackay, swim with the sharks without being eaten alive. He said, Jim, tell them, prepare to win. Geez, thanks, Harvey. What's that mean? I don't get it. He says, no, stop, think. Prepare to win. The more preparation, the more knowledge you have, the more chance of success you'll have, and the more confident you'll be. That's why Tom Brady, after winning a playoff game, goes into the game room and watches videotapes of the next week. Because he's prepared. When he steps on that field, he's prepared to win. It's just all about, confidence is all about preparation and eliminating that fear, eliminating that little person on your shoulder that says you're not good enough, because it's a lie. It's all fiction. And if you do that, then the next challenge for you is this issue of clarity. Now, here's an example of clarity. All right, how often, when someone's talking to you, are you listening or are you formulating a response before they finish talking? I'm guilty. I'm guilty. How often does someone come up and shake your hand and I go, oh, darn, what's their name again? I don't listen. I know I don't. It's something I have to really work on. Mark Cuban, one of our fellow Dallasites, has a method, because he does this too. And someone told him a long time ago, Mark, every time you walk into a meeting, write down the word listen on the top of your pad. And he does. Because if you can't understand what someone's saying, if you can't comprehend, if you can't take someone's opinion, as complex as it may be, and break it into simple terms, you're not really going to be able to respond effectively, because all you're going to do is get them mad, because they know you didn't listen. So that clarity of communication is both inbound, listening, and outbound, communicating, taking very complex things and breaking them into simple terms. One of my favorite examples of this, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, the astrophysicist, he uses a beautiful example, and he talks about algebra. And he said, anybody ever think they're going to use algebra? Does anybody in here use algebra in your day-to-day job? Oh, okay. 2 people. But most of us are sitting in class going, why am I learning this stuff? I'm never, ever going to use it. Here's an astrophysicist saying he didn't think he was ever going to use it. But he explained it like this. He said, you take this complex formula and write it on the board, and then you realize, oh, okay, I've got to do the parentheses first. And what you're doing is you're breaking those parentheses down, you solve for those. And you do that first. And then I think you do division next, or multiplication. Yeah. I can't even remember. But you take these complex equations, you break them into pieces, and then you solve the pieces. Then you break it down one more time. He said, we study algebra not for the math. We study algebra because it helps us think. You use that same approach to solving problems out there in the real world, and it works. Because no one can comprehend the huge, complex issue that you may face. But if you break it into pieces and solve it like you would solve an equation in algebra, it's not that hard, and you can actually get away with it. So again, change, confidence, clarity. If I leave you with anything, that's the gift I have, and that's what I hope you'll not only take with you, but be able to share. Quickly, I'm going to share with you the how to learns, because these are things we also forget. We all know them. We all learn critical thinking in grade school. Can everyone in the room tell me that they practice this every day when they watch the news? Or do you sit there and go, get mad? Well, we learn the Socratic method in grade school, but we don't use it in everyday life. Ask why. Someone's got an opinion they don't like, ask them why. Pull them out. Try to understand. The critical thinking piece, get the facts, get the data. It's all available to you. The internet now is a portal to unlimited learning if you use it. So that opportunity is there. And then curiosity is something that we're all innate with children. We're always curious, but we kind of put that aside sometimes when we lose our curiosity. But curiosity is the heart of learning. If you're not curious, you're never going to continue learning. So, and then finally, creativity. I told you I play music, I art. I didn't learn the piano. I play the piano to learn. There's a big difference because the piano is actually math. Music is math. And I am subtly, subconsciously using math when I play the piano. And it just helps me utilize that right brain creativity that tends to be dormant sometimes if we let it. But we all are capable. So those are the how to learns: critical thinking, curiosity, and creativity. And the most important, and this is especially true, I really emphasize this when I talk to students, but if we look at what's going on in society, we probably need to think about this too. The why to learn being collaboration, because we all find it's easier to do things ourselves, but more is better. And my favorite example of collaboration is I learned to play the flutophone down there in Grafton, and then I learned to play the trumpet after that. And I was terrible. So put me in a little group youth orchestra, and even though we were all probably terrible, the harmony that was created was a beautiful thing. And the same thing works if you go to the symphony. You pick one instrument. An oboe is interesting, but it's not that great, or bass by itself. But you bring those instruments together. They're all very different. They all have different personalities, different sounds. You bring them together, and it's beautiful harmony. And that's the same way we together can work together. But it's not easy. We have to then do the last piece of this, second piece of this, which is recognize that cultural literacy is critically important. One of the young man is going to Belfast on junior year abroad, right? I was telling you about my junior year abroad experience. I ended up with the privilege of going to London, and all of a sudden I was a minority. I was like, what? You don't like Americans? Everybody loves Americans. They were calling me a Yank, and they didn't want to invite me to play cricket. So I was a baseball player. And then they brought me out to play cricket, and I realized this bat's about that wide. I can crush this thing. My confidence kicked in. But I learned cultural literacy. I learned that I had to adapt. They didn't have to adapt to me. I was the outsider. I was the one unique. I was different. And each of them was very different. I learned Pakistani culture. I learned Indian culture. I learned my British friends. I learned that Irish friends were very different from my British friends. And that cultural experience, that cultural literacy, by the time I became CEO of a global corporation, proved incredibly an invaluable experience. Little did I realize I'd be leading a chain where thousands and thousands of franchisees were Pakistani or Indian, and now I understood their culture. I'd been to their weddings. So the idea of cultural literacy, I learned that the more we can learn from others, it makes us a patchwork quilt of everybody we've encountered. And I love the definition of humility that Norman Vincent Peale uses. Norman Vincent Peale wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. I get accused sometimes that, Jim might be a little too confident, bridges over into arrogance. Norman Vincent Peale said the difference between arrogance and just confidence is humility. And he didn't describe humility as being a shrinking violet. It was humility defined as, I know that I can learn from somebody. Every single person has something that I can learn from them. And if I just try to tap into that, then I'm not going to be perceived as arrogant, because I will stop short, because I know I can learn from them. And it's a practice, it's a technique that we can all do. None of these things are rocket science. They are all things that we're all absolutely capable of doing if we're aware of them. And then finally, I'll leave you with a character question. This is especially important when I'm talking to children, or students. I talk about brand, and I ask them, what's more important to you, Coke or Pepsi? Or how about an unbranded cola? And they all have a point of view. They've all got an opinion. Our character, our integrity, our humility, our compassion for others, our sense of faith in something is that character that people see and feel when they interact with us. It's our brand. It's the thing that says Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever you are, your brand is your character. And these are things that we can learn and work on and practice. And so together, those are the opportunities that let me encourage people to say, the future really is in your hands. Now, if I'm talking to a group of students, I hold up my phone and I say, you don't like your class, you don't like your teacher, you don't like your public school system, you think you're being taught things that aren't true, you have a portal to unlimited learning right in your back pocket. No excuse. I just had to borrow encyclopedias and I turned out okay. You can do this. The future is in your hands, literally. For us in society, I say the same thing. We are being overcome by fear. Turn on any news channel, listen to any of our leaders, and unfortunately, fear sells, fear motivates. But as humans, if we can control that portion of our brain that causes us to fight or flight, react, and we can temper our reactions with critical thinking, with curiosity, with collaboration, with cultural literacy, with all of these other elements, with character, then we can offset this negative fear that's gripping the country and gripping our companies in many cases. It can put companies out of business. I like to quote Yoda. I can quote a Greek philosopher, but I use Yoda because people identify more with Yoda. He was teaching young Luke, and he said, Luke, he said, ignorance leads to fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to violence. Luke, replace that ignorance with knowledge, the force. Knowledge leads to understanding, understanding leads to hope, and hope leads to peace. So I'm on a mission to get people just to stop and think, just to be what we are as humanity, which is compassionate, which is understanding, which is curious, which is creative. All of these things we are. We just need to be reminded sometimes. So that's what I've tried to accomplish in the book, and to encourage people to realize the future is in your hands. And tonight, you're all going to get a copy of the book. Thank you to the Worcester Economic Club for being able to be kind enough to make a copy available to everybody. I was out there furiously signing them. If you didn't get a signed one, I'll give you one. My request for you, though, is that this is a book that I don't want to end up on the shelf. I collect books. I collect books, especially ones that are signed. But I don't want this book to end up on the shelf. I would hope that you will give this book to someone. So this is a code for Amazon, but there's plenty of places you can find the book. I hope you will take the one that's signed and put it on your shelf, but order one to give to someone else so that they too can understand these basic reminders that I think I've found are possible to be able to help change lives. So with that, thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you too will share my mission to spread the word that education is freedom and the future is in our hands. Thank you.